thanks first of all for having me. I'm very happy to be here. It's been a while since I've joined this. I don't want to say how long, but way too long for sure. Yeah, but like we already heard, I want to talk quickly about foundation models because I think they're really cool. And I think they're an incredible tool that we now have at our hands and at our disposal. And so for my first slide, I want to say that slides are for the week, and I don't want to show slides, but instead I want to show quick shout out if you can see my Xcode window, because this is where we do all the work.
Can you bump up the font like a little bit just in case?
The font size, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Is it better now?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks. All right. Okay, so the way I have structured this is I want to give a direct example because I think this is how we best learn. And then I want to quickly show other code examples. And then I want to mention a few things towards the end that I think are interesting and are relevant for everybody. But what could go wrong with some live coding to begin with, right? So I have prayed to the demo gods that everything works. One thing I've noticed with the foundation models is they tend to break the preview and the simulator quite a bit. So let's see if we get a chance to see this in action today. But before I start coding, I want to quickly mention, maybe not everybody has heard of what the foundation models actually are or what the framework is. And basically, it's just a LLM that is shipping with iOS that we as developers can use. And if we hear LLM, we mostly think about stuff like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. And this is not that. It's similar, but it's smaller, it's less powerful, it just has less capabilities. But that doesn't make it less useful for us. So specifically, we as developers and maybe indie developers, it's an amazing tool for us that we can leverage for many, many things. And I want to show you a few examples today. And the goal is just to see that there are many use cases that maybe we don't think about really, but yeah, we'll see a few of the examples that we can build. And I want to mention a few others towards the end. So first of all, I built a wonderful app here. It's not very complex, I would say. It's a quiz. And I am not that creative. So I created an example question, and we can start the quiz. And the question is, who's the coolest of the iOSDevHappyHour organizers? Okay, I don't wanna click and see who's the one. But I want to be more creative than that. I want to have more questions. So let's rerun this to see the original screen again. And I'm not only not very creative, but I'm also quite lazy. So I want, of course, the AI to do the job so that I don't have to think that much. All right, so the question is how do we do this? I think the foundation models are quite good for this because they will run locally on the device of the end user. So we don't have to download anything. And we don't have any of the other things that we might need to do, right? So, okay, we can now start by first importing the foundation models. And well, it's as easy as that, right? So I want to test this out a little bit. And for that, I want to test out logic. And let me create a function for this, right? So let's create a function. Let's call it generate question. Let's make it async because we probably need this. And we return a question. And the question, as you can see below, that's this struct here. So it's a very simple struct. It has a text that is the question itself. Then we have some options. So 4 answers, and then we have the correct answer. So it's pretty simple, right? And what we can do is we can return the question, and let's for now return the example that I have to see how that works. And now I want to test logic, and I want to share a tip with you that I found out while creating this, and I think is the coolest and most underrated feature that I've seen in the past days or weeks. And that is that we can use playgrounds here. So we can import the playgrounds package. And what we can then do is we can now say, I want a playground here. And inside this playground, I can now say, I want a question. So I can say garda question equals await generate question. And then I want to print this question. All right. And what I can do now is next to the preview, I can now switch here and I can actually see how this question looks like or what the print statement does, which I think is pretty cool. And it doesn't build at the moment. So let's see what's going wrong here. And yeah, we can't return this. So we need to return, let's just print an error statement. And now if I run this, we should see that this actually works. And I need to return, so otherwise it won't run. Okay, the build succeeds. So just to say again, like how cool is this? I can, like, next to my preview here where I can see the UI in action, I can actually run experiments with logic. And because I haven't seen anyone talk about this, but I think it's quite a cool thing that the Playgrounds team has been cooking up with an easy integration like this. All right, but we want to have a generated question now from the model. And for this, we first need to initialize a model. And with this, like, we can use a session for this. And as the autocomplete already suggests, it's called a language model session. So LLMs are called large language models. And so this is a language model session. And we can use this to now generate something. So let's say we want to create a response. And I can't type, but we can now say we want to try await because this uses async await. And now we can say session, and we want to have a response. We can put something in like tell me a joke. And this will run. And we can then print out the response with response.content. So if I run this, I need to respond to instead of in, and then I can run this. And once it has built, which it doesn't, so we need to unpack this. So this is an optional, so let's print it like this. And we can run it again. And it will eventually output something, hopefully. But as we can see, like, we can just test out logic here, right? So that's quite good. And I can see it broke already. So good example for things not working at times, at least in the preview. But yeah, so let's continue, because this is not really helpful for us, right? We don't want to have a joke. We want to have a object that we can use inside our app. So we need to be more specific here. And we have multiple ways to do this. And the first thing that we can do is we can actually here add an instructions parameter. And this is where we can instruct the model what their role is. And for example, I can now say you are a helper to generate basic questions that always have a definitive answer. You provide, and we see this break again, I'm not sure if you see it, and always a definitive answer. And you provide 4 options. I'm not sure you can see this, but I'm getting constant error messages. So let's close this on the side. And you provide 4 options for the answer, where 1 always has to be correct. So this is what we tell the model specifically. So this is the general instructions that we give it. So the model now knows its role. So it now knows, okay, this is what I need to do. And now for the prompt here, we don't want to have a joke, but instead we can say it should now say generate a quiz question about, let's say, world geography. So with this, we're getting more specific to what the model should respond with. And that's good. But we would now need to parse this to actually get a question. So we need to have a real example here, and we need to parse it into a text, into the options, and into the correct answer. And we can actually do this when we can tell the model that we want to have a specific type generated. And we can say we want to have the question that we have defined here. And this won't work because we need to do something in order to do this. And specifically, we need to say we want to have a generable struct. And what this does is it simply tells the LLM that the type it should generate, so the object it should return to us, should be specifically of this type, which is great because we can directly plug it into the logic of our app without needing to parse anything, without needing to handle all the error messaging that might be related to it. And these models, if we don't give it a very strict way to answer, it will be very generic and it might hallucinate. So there might be different answers coming back. And so with that, we can specifically tell it, this needs to be the format. And we can now also say we want to have not only a generable type here, but we can also add a guide. And with the guide, we can now say, hey, let's describe what this property actually is, right? So here I can say, okay, the text, this is the text of the question. And then for the options, we can add another guide. We can here say, okay, so these are the options for the answer to the question, right? But we want to have specifically 4 options because this is how our quiz looks like. So what we can also say is we want to have a count of 4 items here. So with that, we have a question generated with the text and 4 options as the answer. And then for the last operator here, for the last parameter of the correct answer, we want to be saying that here I want the correct answer to the question, and it must be one of the options. So with this, we have given the model a very concrete description of not only how our type looks like, but also how it should generate all the parameters that our type consists of. And with this, we see we can now use this in our response. And we can now say, okay, we want to have a question here, which is then the response.content, and then we return this question. And with this, we will be generating a question object. So if we go back here, it already says, okay, this is a question. Which country has the largest economy in the world? And the options are China, India, US, or Germany. And the correct answer is the US. So it's able to infer from what we have described and what we have strongly typed in our question object, it will be able to infer the type from this. And I think that's pretty cool. So let's plug it into our system here. So let's create another state property here for the session. And let's be lazy and let's just copy this over. This is going to be the language model session. And then let's also create a button, and let me copy this over because it's not very cool to see me type that. And here we say we want to have a quiz about world geography again, and we will assign this to the question. And if the question is there, we will have it show up. So what we can do is we can run this again. We see the generate question option now. And if I click this, it will think for a while. And then it will generate a question. And as you can see, it's a different one compared to the one I just showed you. It's now which of the following is the largest continent by land area? And I would say it's probably Asia, which is correct. So with this, we have basically a infinite amount of questions in our quiz that we can get AI generated. And like there's more options that we could add here. For example, we could have different categories, which we could use an enum for example. And all of this is usable with that. But I want to show you a few other examples, 3. Like we're not going to code this, but at least want to show them to you just to get a feel of what is possible here. And the first one is going to be a summarization example. And this is just, as we can see on the right, this is just a text. I copied this from the Swift blog that we can now click to summarize. And once the model has finished, it will give us a summary of that text. And the code for this is quite straightforward. As we can see here, it's a language model session again. I'm not even giving it instructions. I'm just giving it the prompt of, please summarize the following text in 2 to 3 sentences. And it will automatically run. We can say session.respond to the prompt and then update the summary. So it's quite cool to very easily, with a few lines of code, get a summary tool that runs completely on device without us needing to download anything or to add anything. It's just working. The next is a generation example. So we can here say, I want to see it write a poem about Swift UI. And let's generate this. And as you can see, it builds up gradually and it writes a poem about Swift. I don't want to judge about quality here. I gave it the instruction to be a brilliant poet. So you be the judge if that worked. But as you might have seen, it streamed the response, right? It doesn't wait until it's finished, but it actually streams while it generates. This is another function here. Instead of the respond function, we can also use a stream response function, which then returns an async await supported stream that we can then update partially. And if we add an animation to this, it will build up gradually. So very cool, very easy, not a lot of code, and it just works and it ships with the OS. We have more options here. So for example, we can change certain parameters here, like temperature, so how creative the whole thing should be. But in general, this is just how simple it really is. And for the last example, I want to show content tagging. So for example, you get an email, right? And it's quite lengthy. It has a lot of text. And of course, we're all lazy, so we don't want to read anymore. So we can just click extract action items. And what it will do for us is it will actually crash. But what it should do is it should just generate 3 action items for us and just extract 3 emotions. I took this from the .dc session as an example, and it's quite cool how easy this if it works. And you can see here, yeah, the actions it took out of there is you should thank somebody, there's an outline and draft, and the emotions here are gratitude, pride, and optimism. So it seems to be quite a positive email. Of course, we could also adjust this to look different or to give us different answers. But yeah, this is just how easy you can work with this. All right, these are all the examples that I wanted to share. I wanted to run the app real quickly. And for that, I think I need to quickly change the screen I'm sharing again. All right, because I need to have this joke, right? So like the question is like, who is the coolest one, right? I think we need to answer this before we go. And like it could be Alex, but that's actually wrong. It could be Michaela, which is also wrong. Frank, well, no. Adrian, maybe. Well, I also think we forgot someone. So
I'm gonna
Chris, maybe. Is it Chris? Also no. So probably the answer is all of them, of course. So as you have seen, slides are for the week. Having said this, I will show slides. So take that as you will. But yeah, like so what we seen? Like we have seen that language model session is the class that we need to remember, that we will need to initialize to work with. And then we can use this session to respond to a certain prompt. We can also use the stream response, which will then give us a mechanism to just iterate over the answers from the LLM or from the language model coming in over time. So we can directly show something without our users needing to wait until the entire response has been generated. Next, we use the generable macro to prepare a type for the large language model to directly generate and give us so that we can use this inside our apps. And for that, we also use guides where we can explain the parameters of our types so that the generation will actually be accurate and the types that we have and the parameters that we have are correctly generated. Then the coolest thing was the playground macro where we can test our code. And I think it can be quite helpful for things like testing view models or other logic inside our app to directly spawn next to the preview. And like every preview hater now can also hate on playgrounds, but they are actually fantastic. So you're being wrong if you do that. And last, we had instructions and prompts, where instructions are the things that we give the model in general so that it knows what its general purpose and the role is. And the prompt is a specific task or the specific thing we handed that it should fulfill for us. And there is much, much more to explore there. There was just really the baseline. There is tool calling. So we can define certain things or certain tools or functions that the model can also call. For example, it could check the weather, or it could create a ticket on GitHub or on Linear or wherever for us if we give it a tool that can actually handle this. There is like mechanisms in the outside Apple world for this, but it's good to see that at least basic support for this is there. There are certain guardrails, so we can limit it to have certain limits that we don't have any sensitive data that might be shared or other things. We have proper error handling. So in case, for example, people don't have access to Apple Intelligence, which is required for this, we get generous like error messages that we can use to handle this. There's also context handling. So we can't give it an infinite number of text, but we need to cut it at a certain point. And if we overflow this, we can also handle this. We can also handle languages. So our users might not speak English. They might have different locales. So we can also handle that. There is transcripts, so we can see the past conversation it had. And we can actually ask follow-up questions to initial prompts that we have. There are complex guides. So I briefly touched upon how we can describe our parameters, and this can get quite complex. So we can use regex there. We can use different schemas. So for example, if we want to have a character in a game, we could clearly guide it to generate certain responses or certain behaviors. And then there's an entire other world, which is called MLX, which allows us to run complete models on the devices that are not limited by anything, basically. It's just all the models that are available, or not all of them, but many of them can be converted to run on Apple's platforms natively. And so, as we have seen, like there's a lot of tasks that are possible to do with this, and these are just the ones that Apple suggested. And there can be many more. So if you like take anything away from the things I've just said, is that you should definitely start experimenting with this. Because I think the very cool thing that Apple gave us with this tool is that we can now try and see how we can best use this in our apps. So everyone from like large companies and even to small indie developers can use this because it ships with the SDK. So like it ships with every iPhone there that supports Apple Intelligence. But we can think about how we can use this inside our apps to leverage this and create cool features and functions for our users. So that's all I wanted to say. I hope you have been inspired and start playing around with this, because I think it's a really cool tool. And I hope you have seen the cool things it can do and start playing around with this. And like I'm happy to hear what your ideas for that are and what you want to try and build with this. So thanks for having me, and thanks for listening to this.
Nice. Thank you so much. That was really awesome. I hadn't had a chance to get so familiar with that, and I think a lot of people here feel the same way. I see one question. So I'm just going to ask it for you, Bryce. What advantages might someone with prior experience in machine learning have when using this new framework as compared to a developer who's newer to AI or in machine learning?
So I would say there's a learning curve with this. That you can get started quite easily, but I think it requires a different mindset because if we have regular programming, like we write text in the form of a programming language, in our case, mostly Swift, and we have a very deterministic output, hopefully, right? Like sometimes not, but most of the times we know, like we write something and this is what comes out of it, right? And for AI, that's sometimes different. Like you don't always know what to expect. And there are certain things that you need to learn. For example, like how we handle the instructions that we give a model are not tied to this specific framework. But if you have worked with AI before, or if you have worked with like prompting models before, you will know that there is a learning curve, that you can get better at this to directly or at least more quickly get the output that you want. So I think like the general things like working with AI apply here as well. So if you have worked with ChatGPT before, you know that there's a certain way you need to talk to it to get the best output. And the same is true here. And like I just think that the convenience comes definitely from it just being available every time you need it without you needing to ship anything or any model with it. Hope that answers the question.
And then I had a selfish question, but it sounded like from your from what you mentioned in the demo, the user of the app has to have Apple Intelligence enabled, right? Like in order to leverage this under the hood, right?
Yeah.
Is there a like an entitlement or like an entitlement or something like that? Not entitlement, I forget. Something you can prompt the user to enable that, or they just have to like be told through the app to go and enable it?
I don't think there's an entitlement for this or any like permissions that you can request,
Right.
but you will get an error if they don't have it. So like if it's not enabled on their devices, like we can ask for this. And I mentioned the error handling, and that's part of that. So we can definitely check if it's available. And while I don't think there's a way to specifically enable it or like guide them. We can guide them. It's just like we need to explain what they need to do in order to use this. So like no direct permissions or entitlement, but like we can at least have a fallback and check if that's available.